Hello, my beautiful loves. I just woke up. My eyes are so puffy. I sleep with my dog because I love him so much and I can't say no to him. And I'm pretty sure that I have like some type of allergic reaction to his hair because every time I wake up, my eyes are swollen. My face is congested. And then once I give myself like 30, 45 minutes, take a shower, wash my face, then it doesn't bother me as much. But excuse the puffy eyes. So I woke up to a comment from my friend Amanda, and she wanted to know more about like how how long does it take to silence our minds. And so I wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about the mind and the thoughts and all of that jazz. So what is our mind? Our mind is a computer database. It's the best way that I can explain it. It's like an extremely powerful computer. And its job is to sort, collect, and analyze data and then draw conclusions. So the way that this computer reports back to you information that it is taking in or conclusions that it is making is it speaks to you through thoughts. Now, I think the biggest thing to start with is understanding that you are not your thoughts. You are the one absorbing the thoughts. You're hearing the thoughts. And so when your brain is making these decisions and it's categorizing information, it's going to start letting you know, right? And then you can listen to the thought and say, yes, either thank you, brain, you did a great job here, I agree with you, or you could say, wait, something's not quite right. And that's a very important distinction to make because you are actually the one that's governing and mastering, not mastering, what is the word? A steward. You are a steward of the mind. The mind is not you. And so in this world, I don't believe that we were created to have this much stimulation. Right? So when you think about how we used to use the brain back in the day, the brain didn't get exposed to as much as it does now. Like when you were living with your little tribe inside of your little itty bitty world back in the day, like all you had exposure to was what was happening to you and your immediate self and your immediate tribe in your immediate area. And nowadays, we have access to everything. We know what is going on thousands and thousands of miles away in this city, in that city, in my grandma, in this town, in other countries. We know about war. We know about all this kind of stuff. And we are constantly inundated with information that our brain is trying to process. It's working on overload. So if you've ever experienced overstimulation, or if you know somebody who can't deal very well with overstimulation, which, side note, I think this is why we're seeing a lot of people on the spectrum is they're like, stop it. The body is trying to evolve and stop that overstimulation. By default, because it's like we're putting ourselves in these situations which is overwhelming. So as we're being overstimulated, our brain is trying its best to keep up. And because there's so much going on, it is constantly throwing thoughts at you, constantly. So a lot of people will say, I overthink. I can feel myself overthinking. There's just so much and I don't know how to stop. So one of the things that we want to do inside of Upload, one of the things that we focus on is trying to start listening to our thoughts. So the first thing we have to do is slow our thoughts down. And that's going to happen by doing the opposite of overstimulating. We start to slow everything down. This is where meditation comes into play, where I teach people how to meditate, how to relax, how to focus on their breath. It brings all of that awareness, all of the things that the mind is going, look at this, 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 and it starts to pull it in and say, wait. I'm just going to focus on me right now, my breath right now, my body right now. I'm not going to be thinking about anything on the external. It's all going to be internal. So the first thing that we do is we pull it internal and we start to slow the thoughts down. Now, I didn't have a guide through this. I was doing this on my own. I was reading a bunch of books about this at the time. This was probably like 8 or 9 years ago. And so I remember I was intentionally trying to slow my thoughts. And it took 8 months. I remember this because on the 8th month when I was meditating, I finally had quiet in my brain. And I was so shocked because I had, as far as I could remember, I had never been quiet. My brain had never been quiet. It was always talking to me. And so it was kind of like this pivotal point. And I shared it a lot in these meditation groups as I started to teach of like, it took me 8 months, guys. Like, be patient with yourself. It took me 8 months. And what's interesting was as I started teaching that class, I started noticing that people were doing it faster than 8 months. And that's because once we know and once we have a guide and once we've actually figured out how, it becomes easier for us to implement. So it's not that it's going to take you 8 months, but it took me 8 months. Now, there's a few things that we do once the mind slows down. Once the mind slows down, we start to actually listen to what the thoughts are saying. I can guarantee you are not aware of everything your mind is saying. It's just way, way, way too much. I totally understand, Amanda. It was so hard for me. I actually question how in the world I continued to work on it, because 8 months, like for me, I don't give 8 months to anything. Like, if you knew me back then, my relationships were quick, my jobs were quick. Like, I was like, 8 months, like, how did I stick with that? But thankfully I did, like, all for purpose and for, on purpose, because I'm here today. But we want to listen to our minds, because most of us have no idea what our minds are saying to us. I used to do this thing when I was first starting to listen to my mind, where intently, was I would record myself speaking. So anytime that I was triggered by something, I put on a camera and I just start talking. I just literally let the thoughts flow from my mind out of my mouth. And then I'd go back once I calmed down. And when you're triggered, fight or flight happens. So your chest will start, your heart will start beating. You start to feel some heat in here, like you feel powerful and adrenaline. You got to wait for all of that to come down. So once I waited for all that to come down, I'd go back and I'd listen to these videos, and it was crazy how many times I was shocked. I would catch myself like, I think that? What the hell? And then that would give me a basis to go in and say, why do I think that? Where did I get that from? So your brain has made conclusions, it has drawn conclusions about everything you've ever experienced from the time that you were little. And sometimes our brain, as we get older, is actually making our trauma worse. Now let me explain what I mean by this. I had a client. This client, I'm trying to be very careful in how I say this. This client and this client's sibling were both being sexually abused when they were little. Now, when I say sexually abused, I want to be careful here, because a lot of times when we think sexual abuse, we think forceful or aggressive. And that wasn't necessarily this experience. They were being sexually abused by another child that was older than them, but still a child. And so it wasn't this big, scary, aggressive type of sexual abuse. It was very subtle, and it was more like, described to them more like a game, right? And so when my client was younger and this was happening, the way that the brain was processing this experience was like, oh, this is so much fun. I really like this game. This is so different. There's kind of that adrenaline by keeping secrets with some of your friends. Like, you feel like you're more like in this group, right? And so as this client got older and the brain started to understand more about what was happening, as you can imagine, the client started to reframe the thoughts around this abuse. Well, now it was like, oh my God, I was taken advantage of. I was sexually abused. I was allowing that to happen to my sibling. Like, what the fuck was wrong with me? Nothing was wrong with you. You were a child. You didn't know. Your brain was making sense of what it knew back then. So a lot of times as we get older and we relive this trauma in our new, more intelligent way of thinking, we see more, we experience more, and then we're like, holy shit, this was much worse than I originally made it out to be in my mind when I was younger. And so people will actually be able to, live through their trauma as a child with hardly any type of, breakdowns. It's just what they're experiencing. They're handling it. And then as they get older and they go back and they look at it, sometimes the trauma is even worse, because now they're thinking about it from a different perspective with more knowledge and really understanding the nastiness or the coercion or the manipulation that was happening behind the scenes. So it makes them feel worse. So sometimes I'll be working with clients who, the more they think about their trauma, the worse the trauma is getting. The worse it's having an impact on them. And so once these thoughts start to slow down, we start to look at them, it gives us a basis to understand, like, where are these thoughts coming from? Where did they derive from? And remember, we are in control of the mind. So we can start to say, no, I'm going to think about this in a different perspective. I'm going to think about this in a different way. I'm going to use my brain in order to help me make sense of this in a way that empowers me and encourages me and keeps me moving forward. It heals me, instead of me using my brain's power to constantly relive the same trauma over and over and over and over again. So that's called deconditioning. There's a lot of deconditioning that goes on inside of the mind when we are looking at, healing. So I love using this example too, that your brain is kind of like the system that it works off of, because it's a computer. It has its own algorithm. Just like Facebook has its own algorithm, Google has its own algorithm. If you've ever tried to use somebody else's phone to do something, you'll notice that phone has an algorithm that has created a system that looks ideal for that person, right? And so if I am on my phone and I'm Googling something and I use somebody else's phone to Google something, we're going to get different responses in that search engine based on how our phone has decided that we like to see information, or what information we like to hear. Well, your brain has its own algorithm. So it's very important that you first realize what the algorithm looks like, and then you intentionally go in there and you start to rewire that algorithm by letting your brain know, no, I don't want to see this stuff anymore. I don't want to think about this stuff anymore. This is what I want to think about. This is what I want to see, right? And you can actually reprogram the brain to start seeing the beautiful things in life instead of the pain. You can start to train it to see the blessings instead of the trauma. And it's this really wild experience, because your brain is such a powerful computer. Like, you have no idea what you're sitting on. Like, you're sitting on so much power, but you're letting that power mess with you instead of support you in life and in this purpose. So it does take a while. It does take a while to slow down your brain. It does take a while to listen to the thoughts. It does take a while to unpack everything. But think about how old you are right now. I'm 30, I'm going to be 36 next month. That means I've had 36 years of this computer running the way that it's running, operating the way that it's operating, which means that it's going to take some time to decondition it and get it to work in the way that I want to. But what is so cool is that if you couple your mindset work with your energetic healing, which is the other part that we look at, when you are traumatized, it doesn't just mess with your brain. It messes with your energy as well. And energy, when you feel energy, you feel emotion. That is why trauma is emotionally distraught, and it is also mentally distraught, because you have this trauma happening to both systems, your energetic being and your mental being. So you've got to work on both of those. Well, what's really cool is when you're working on your energetic being and healing your energetic being, sometimes it transitions into healing in your mind without you having to do very much of anything. So what that looks like to me is like, have you ever had your phone and it says update needed, or an app needs an update, and you just restart your phone, and as soon as it restarts, it's like the app just is different. It just looks different. It can just do different things. It has different capabilities. You didn't have to be there to watch how that upgrade happened. You literally just restarted the phone and all of those new resources and features were there. Well, the brain is the same way, in that sometimes as we're healing our energetic wounds, and I teach that inside of Up Level 2, but as we're working on these energetic wounds, we'll go to sleep and we'll wake up the next day and all of a sudden our brain is operating on a different wavelength. It is just completely different than it was the night before. And these are these huge transformational shifts that people talk about that they experience. It's super powerful and it's super cool. So when I'm working with somebody on healing, I don't just pick one way of healing. I'm looking at it collectively. What are we doing to heal the mind and decondition the thoughts that you took away from this trauma? What are we doing to heal the body and release the traumatic energy that you've been holding on to? Like, we look at all of those things to make sure that the healing is complete, right? Like, we want to be different people walking out of our healing journey. We don't want to have to keep dealing with this bullshit. So let me know if this helps. Let me know if you guys have any other questions. I love to share more about this stuff. So anything that you guys are wanting to know about, I'd love for you guys to pick my brain and to share this stuff. Hope you guys are having a beautiful day.